Hey, so we are live right now and we are making a simple game called Attack of the Commons. It'll be a simple arcade shooter without any sprites. So, hey Agnes, it's going well. Hello Noah, hello Chubi. And so this is my first stream and I have no experience with this thing and I'm not sure what I'm doing. So, let's see. We're gonna start by creating a character. So in this game, there won't be any sprites. Each character will basically be a string of text, and collisions will be handled with a collision circle function. So this is gonna have a string property. There will be a font. Yeah, so I have to make a font first. This will be a default. Do let me know if you can see everything and hear me. Yeah, so this is gonna be the default font. And to draw it, I'm gonna use draw text center. All right, everything is good. Thank you. So this is a custom script that basically sets the alignment to center and middle and simply draws the text. Of course, I need to set the font as well. Now I should make the player. We're gonna inherit the create event, and this will be a what are your thoughts about the quarantine? I mean, quarantining is necessary right now, and everyone should do it, and I'm doing it as well. But my life is basically quarantine. I work from home, do everything, so my life hasn't changed really. But yeah, quarantining is necessary. So this will be basically a bunch of brackets. Gonna make the enemy as well. The size for this will be 1280 by 720. I'm gonna place the player here. Now for the collisions, the collision will basically be a circle because there's no sprite, so there's no mask. So collisions have to be handled manually with a collision circle function. So the radius for that will be 32 for now. Now the player, now each character does need movement. So for that we'll have move X and move Y. So everyone who's watching the stream, what's the time there? Where are you from? Let me know what's the time there. Here it's 1:30 p.m. right now in the afternoon. Movement will be in the step event. For the player, all the movement and all the input, we're gonna do it in the begin step event. So Chubby, you're from Germany, it's 10 a.m. Hello Irfan. And Agnes, you're from Lithuania and it's 11 a.m. So good morning to you all. Now the move X for this will be mouse X minus X. So it's gonna move according to the mouse. I'm gonna run it now. It's 1 a.m. over here in the west coast of the US. Alright. So yeah, you can see the character. It's a little small, so I'm gonna increase the size in the font. So now the player is here and it does move on the x-axis according to the mouse position. We need some rotation there so that when we move it, when there's some velocity to the character, it sort of turns around. So I'm gonna do it in the character. So when there's positive movement to the right in the x-axis, we want it to turn right. So that's actually negative rotation. So we're gonna use a minus sign here. Into, let's see, 0.2 for now. Yeah, there's no rotation there. Let's make it 2. Oh yeah, the image, there's no sprite, so of course the image angle doesn't affect the text at all, so there will be no rotation. Luckily this function does allow rotation for the text. If you see in the script, it uses draw text transformed, and there's image x scale there, y scale, and angle. So I can simply pass in the extra optional arguments here. Yeah, so there's a lot of rotation. Now I'm gonna reduce it to 0.2 and test it again. So there we go, there is rotation. Now we wanna give the player the ability to shoot. So let's see how we're gonna do that. Basically, you're gonna create a power up variable in the object. Then I'm gonna create a power up class for now. I'm gonna make this a character as well. And this will be basically the OR operator. I'm actually gonna move this down to the O power up basic. Set it to inherit from the power up parent and put this here. Yeah, alright, good night, Noah. I'm gonna create the power up here. So the player's gonna start with a basic power up. Now in the end step event we want the power up to be on the player. So with the power up, hello Omar gamer, and this will be just gonna move to the player's position, and the image angle is gonna be the same. For the Y I'm gonna add a little bit of offset. We're gonna see what happens now, and we see the power up on the player. I think we need a little bit of space between these brackets. Do let me know if there's anything wrong with my audio, if it's too low or too loud. Looks good now. We also need a bullet class, and this will be a bullet. This will be a character as well. So when I did make the character class, I didn't realize that I was gonna be using it for so much. I thought I was only gonna use it for the player, the enemy, but as you can see, I'm also using it for the power up, the bullet. So basically, that's everything. That's anything that's a string in this game will be a character. All right, thank you for letting me know. Now the bullet will be a semicolon. In the character, I'm gonna create an user event for the shooting. So the enemies will shoot and the player will shoot too. I think I should create a separate class for the player and the enemy. So maybe that would be an entity, because we're using the character for anything, like even a power up, even the bullets. So the players and the enemies should be a different class. So we're gonna make this the O entity. I'm gonna set the parent to set the parent to O character, and the children to O player and O enemy. And now, so the shooting user event is gonna go from the character and into the entity instead. Whenever I use user events, I like to write them down here in the create event using variables. And in the player I can take the input and call the user event to shoot a bullet. So in the begin step event I'm gonna take the input, for now it's gonna be a simple mouse press. And in the end step event we are actually gonna call the user event, because in the end step event here we have moved the power up. So after the power up has moved, we're gonna shoot from its new position. So if we are shooting, call user event shooting. Now in the entity we do need a direction variable, because the player will be shooting up and the enemies will be shooting down. I'm gonna name this move direction. This will be minus 90 for the player, and for the enemy which inherits from O entity, I'm gonna set the move direction to 90. So actually minus 90 is down and 90 is up. I had it the other way around. And now in the event we can shoot first of all, in the bullet we need a move speed. So the default speed for now will be 20, and this is the class, so I'm gonna have to create a new bullet. Should be bullet basic. Hey underneath, I am from India, New Delhi. This is gonna inherit from the bullet class, and I'm gonna move the text into the basic bullet. So back into the entity, we made the move speed here, so we're gonna use it to create the bullet and set it moving. So we're gonna do instance create layer x y. For the x and the y, we're actually gonna use the power up. Then we have the same layer, and then the object for now should be, so the bullet that we shoot should be taken from the power up. So we're gonna do power up dot bullet. Then in the power up we're gonna create a variable bullet. So this is the bullet that this power up shoots, and this will be none for now. And in the basic power up, we're gonna make it O bullet basic. Then in the player, not in the entity, with the bullet, the direction will be the other instances move direction, and then we're gonna set the we're gonna set the move x and the move y using the length dir variables functions. So the length here will be the move speed of the bullet. What are your plans for upcoming tutorials? Well, right now I'm working on updating my crafting course on Udemy, and I have a list of tutorials that I'm gonna make, but I haven't selected what tutorial I'm gonna make yet, so I don't have any definite plans yet that I can share. So the length, the direction, and this is gonna give us an x component made from this length and this direction, so that will become the move x. And for the move y we're gonna do the same, but use the length dir y function. So this should set the bullet moving in the direction, and in the player we took input in the shoot variable. If that was true, in the end step event we ran the user event 0, which is here inherited from O entity, and that creates a bullet taken from the power up. And in the power up we have the bullet set to O bullet basic. So let's see how that goes. So we can shoot now. We can shoot semicolons. but I think they are too small. So I'm gonna create a bigger font for those objects. This will be ft bigger, no, ft big, and this will be ft normal. So in the character I'm gonna change this to ft normal. Now for ft big I'm gonna set the font size to 40, and in the bullet I'm gonna set the font to ft big. How long is the stream gonna be? I don't know. This is my first stream, and as I said in the beginning, I'm not sure what I'm doing, so let's see how it goes. Probably not longer than an hour, I think. Let's see how long I can last. Let me see if I can put in M here and get the correct character. Yeah, that works. Because the semicolon wasn't really looking like a semicolon there. I think that's because of the speed. We also need a cooldown in the player because we can now shoot as fast as we want, but there should be a limit on that. So once we have a cooldown, we can also allow holding the mouse button for shooting instead of pressing it every time. So we're gonna set up the cooldown in the entity. So there will be a variable for the cooldown. This will be the cooldown timer, which will be 0. This will be the cooldown time, let's say, which will be 30 for now. No, not 30, that's too slow. 15. So with 15 you're gonna shoot 4 bullets in every second. And in the end step event we're gonna handle the cooldown. If the cooldown timer is greater than 0, bring it down by 1. Then here we're gonna check if the cooldown timer is at 0, and only then create a bullet. Then we're gonna set the cooldown to the cooldown time. So we have this in the end step event. So in the player we need to inherit it here so that code runs here. So now we have cooldown here, and in the begin step event, instead of doing mouse check button pressed, we are simply gonna do mouse check button. So this is gonna allow for holding the mouse button instead of pressing it every time, and it is working. Now we're gonna make the enemies. So enemy here is only a class, so I'm gonna create a new group for that. And it's actually really fun creating games where you don't have any sprites. It's completely empty now, but we still have a working game right now. Now this will be enemy basic. Everything's basic at first. And this will be a comment. That's why the game is called Attack of the Comments. Now for the enemy stuff, we're gonna make it move down. So this will be, its speed will be 4, but the speed needs to be set in the controller, not here. So we are not gonna set it here, we're actually gonna set it in the game controller. Now this is a persistent controller that basically lasts throughout the game. When you start the game, the controller is there, and when you end it, it's there in all the rooms. So we are instead gonna create a new controller, which will be our game controller. So everyone who's watching the stream right now, do let me know how long you've been with Game Maker and what you're making right now. Now here we're gonna create the speed of the game. Starting out, it's gonna be 4, and whenever enemy is created, its speed should be set from the game controller. I'm gonna place the game controller in the room. Now the enemy also needs a property for whether it's active or not. So by default it will be active. Then in the begin step event, if it is active, we are gonna set the move y move y to O controller's game speed. Since Game Maker 8, been busy with other few things in real life, but I was working on online RPG sort of thing. So Michelle, is that online RPG thing still going? And how's it going? So the speed here will be set according to the game speed, so the enemies should be moving. Now we're also gonna inherit the end step event and basically destroy the enemy if it goes out of the room. So now the basic enemy code is there, they move and everything, but we need a system to create the enemies. So I'm just not gonna spawn the enemies one by one. We're actually gonna create batches of enemies. So there will be a rectangular area, and we're gonna create the rectangular area above the room, and we're gonna fill it with enemies, and that area will come down. And when that area is over, basically we're gonna create another area. So let's see how we're gonna code that. We're gonna create a new object for that, which will be our batch. It's gonna have a batch type property. I'm gonna create an enum for the batches. We'll have basic at 0, and the batch type here will be batch basic. Now the area will be a rectangle, so we need an x and a y. We already have an x and a y, and we need a width and a height. The width for now will be the room height, and the height will be room height as well. So Chubi says, I have started Game Maker late December. I'm not working on anything right now because I don't have much time. I see. So you started in late December. Did you make anything? Maybe a small game or something, maybe a demo? So this will be the area, and we need a user event for spawning the enemies inside the batch. Now the batch is also gonna move according to the speed in the game controller. So this is in the game controller. I'm gonna make sure that I used the correct object in the enemy. Okay, so I did. So in the user event, we fill in all the enemies in the batch, and we create the batches in the game controller. So I'm going to create a variable for the last batch that we created. Will be no one for now. And we're going to create not an alarm, but a user event. Yes, I made 2 small games for game jams, but they are really bad. Yeah, well, that's how you start. In the beginning, all the games will be bad, but that's how you keep going. Actually, game jams are the best way to learn. I wouldn't be where I am without game jams, because I never created any commercial games of my own. I've been doing game development for like 6 years, and most of the games that I created have been for jams. And that's how you learn. There's basically a new jam every month, and you create a new game every month, and that's how you grow your skill. So in the user event, we're gonna create a batch. The width will simply be the room width. The height will be random, so it'll be in a range from room height, which will be the minimum, and the maximum will for now be room height into 2. We're gonna create the batch here. I think I should probably make my font larger for the stream so that you can see it easily. Let me know if this is better. So the batch here will be saved in last batch, and this will be, we're gonna use instance create layer. Now for the position, we're gonna set let me see. So we're gonna have a last batch, and for the y, we're gonna do if the last batch exists, we're gonna do last batch not y minus height. If it doesn't exist, then we are gonna simply gonna do minus height. So it will be created. The x will be 0, the y will be the one we just set up, and this will be the layer, and this will be the object. Now we are gonna set the width and the height in the batch, and then call the user event. User event, this is user event fill, let's say for now, and in the batch we're gonna set up the user event variables. User event fill is 0. Now we also want to destroy this object when it goes below the room. So if we're gonna do if y is greater than room height plus 128, which is an arbitrary value, we're gonna do instance destroy. Now this creates the batch, and we're gonna call this user event create batch. We're also gonna type it in the description, and then we're gonna start the gameplay loop by calling this event. Now the reason why I'm using user events instead of scripts, basically I do like this way, like doing it this way, but I think it's gonna be really similar to how it's gonna work after 2.3 comes out, because you're gonna be able to define functions inside objects. So basically, instead of setting up this user event here, you should be able to set up a function or a method in the create event. If you read that post, you're gonna know it was on the your game site. I'm gonna put it in the chat. So yeah, this method is probably gonna be similar to what's coming in 2.3. So that's why you should get used to using user events for now. And when it does come out, you're gonna use functions or methods, whatever they are called. So we started the gameplay loop here by calling the user event, and we're gonna keep track of the last batch. And when it basically comes to, I'm gonna have to go for now, basically be right back for 2 minutes. And I am back. So we're gonna keep track of this last batch in the step event, and when it goes to a certain while limit, we're gonna create a new one. So we're gonna do if instance exists last batch, we're gonna get its y, and if that y is greater than, let's say, minus 60, we're gonna create a new one. Then this event is gonna create a new batch, and so the loop will keep going. So in the batch, we actually need to create the enemies now. It's 4 a.m. Alright, it's 2 p.m. here. So the enemies do have movement from the game controller's game speed. So it's gonna move, and then in the batch, we're gonna create the enemies. we're gonna run a switch statement based on the batch type, and here we have our case for the basic batch. We're gonna have a random enemy count. This will be between 4 to 8, let's say. I'm gonna make it between 2 and 4. We're also gonna multiply it with the height, so that if the batch is longer, there will be more enemies. So for the multiplier, I'm gonna do height divided by room height, and I'm gonna multiply it with the enemy count. So now we have the enemy count set up, and we need to basically figure out how we're gonna do the creation of the enemies. For now, we're gonna do it at random access and random bias with a simple repeat loop. So the enemy X will be I random. We also need a margin, so in that margin area there won't be any enemies created, and we're gonna set that up in the batch properties. So this will be margin equals 128. So the X is gonna be a range from the margin to the room width minus margin. The enemy Y will be a random value for now added to the Y, so it will be our random range from 0 to height minus margin. Let's make it height for now, and the enemy types to create. So I think that's gonna be dependent on the batch, and it should be an array, and from that array the enemies should be selected. So I'm gonna create the array for now, which will only have one element, which is enemy basic. And we're gonna choose a random element from that array to be our enemy object. Enemy object, which will be, let's get the element ID first. Enemy element ID, which will be I random to the array length of the enemies array -1, and then we can do enemies. From that array we can get the enemy at this element, and then we can create it. Enemy Y layer, and then the enemy object, and the enemy should move automatically because of its move Y value set from the game controller, and in the end step event, once it goes out of the room, it should be destroyed. So let's run the game and see. So we have the enemies coming in, and the batches should be working. We're gonna debug it by drawing rectangles. So we are setting the width and the height of the batch here. So in the batch we're gonna draw the rectangle of the batch in a red color. from x and y to x plus width and y plus height, and this will be a outline. So if you set this to 0 you get a fill, and if you set this to 1 you get an outline. So let's see if the batches are working correctly. And there you can see our first batch with the enemies, and there we have our second batch, and then we have our third batch. So the batches are working right now. Now we're gonna do the collisions in the entities. So we have the collision radius in the character. We actually gonna move it to the entity. Oh no, it'll be in the character. And now in the entity. So when we create a bullet, we need to tell the bullet who owns it, whether an enemy owns it or the player. So when we create a bullet in user event 0, we are gonna set a parent variable which tells which instance owns it. So the parent here will be other, simply other, and in the bullet we're gonna create a default value which will be set to no one, and then now in the entity we are gonna check for collisions with the bullets.